Glasgow's city centre, the busy hub of a great network of services. As in all Britain's cities, life revolves around transport. Indeed, without transport, city life would be almost unimaginable. The rail and underground networks shuttle us quickly and quietly from place to place. On the streets, great streams of traffic flow noisily from junction to junction. Taxis, trucks, and the ubiquitous private motor car all jostle for space with that seemingly eternal Cinderella of public transport, the urban bus. Yet, in its many styles and forms, the bus has served us for well over a century and a half. Woven into the fabric of our history in so familiar a thread, we often take it completely for granted. Few of us have not relied on a bus service at one time or another. Whether for work or leisure, the bus remains a popular and convenient form of transport for millions of daily travellers. The modern bus is a marvel of engineering, design and style, the result of a long process of experimentation and development. But bus design also reflects our everyday needs, the things we use buses for, and the standards of service we have come to expect. Over the years, we have changed, and buses have changed with us. Our story begins with George Shillabeer, a London coach builder who launched Britain's first bus service in July 1829. Shillabeer's omnibus ran an hourly service between Paddington and the Bank. The idea quickly caught on, and Shillabeer was soon joined by a host of other operators. From this time onwards, the horse-drawn bus became a familiar feature on the urban landscape. By the 1850s, a top deck had appeared, the intrepid passengers climbing up a ladder and weathering the elements on a crude bench running along the length of the roof. This design, known as the knife board, was to remain dominant for most of the remainder of the century, changing only in response to the emergence of a novel and more efficient competitor. In 1860, George Francis Train inaugurated Britain's first street tramway service. The first tramcar ran from Woodside Ferry to Birkenhead Park, seating an astonishing 48 passengers on 2 decks. Subsequent trams, introduced to London, were more stylish, resembling contemporary railway carriages and evoking the comparatively greater luxury and comfort of railway transport. The immediate success of the tram lay in the inherent advantages of running on rails rather than on primitively paved or cobbled streets. Rails provided a smoother and more uniform surface, allowing a greater number of passengers to be carried in larger vehicles. Better transport made people more mobile, and this had 2 important consequences. The first was a shift in population from the inner cities to the suburbs, and the second was a significant growth in the city centre retail and entertainment industries. For the first time, many thousands of ordinary people could commute in and out of the cities for work, shopping and leisure. While the tram certainly had an impact on existing horse bus operations, capturing much of the bus's clientele, it was not yet fatal. The greater flexibility of the bus and its ability to ply routes not yet viable for tramline construction ensured that it remained both popular and competitive. Competition also brought a number of significant improvements in bus design. The old knife-board benches had, admittedly, improved over the years, but they were now replaced with 2 rows of forward-facing seats. The external ladder was also replaced, becoming a proper staircase, which, although it was the main frame of the bus and open to the elements, was yet significantly safer and more convenient for ascending passengers. The garden seat omnibus, as it became known, offered operators the dual advantages of higher passenger capacity and greater levels of comfort. The electrification of the tramway system in the mid-1880s effectively heralded the obsolescence of horse traction, not only for the tram, but for the bus as well. No longer could the horse bus compete, except on the most unfavourable terms and on the margins of commercial viability. The new trams captured the imagination of Victorian Britain. Gliding effortlessly through the streets, they appeared the very epitome of progress. Yet in little over a decade, the bus was to benefit from an invention that would revolutionise the face of Britain's cities. It was in Edinburgh, today a city almost wholly reliant on the bus for its public transport needs, that Britain's first motor bus service was launched. The service, from Haymarket Railway Station to the General Post Office at the east end of Princes Street, was provided by a Daimler petrol wagonette. These vehicles were produced in considerable numbers and provided the impetus for a period of technical experimentation and development. Within a mere 6 years, the primitive wagonette had been transformed into the classic vehicle that was to remain the standard form for motor buses for the next 50 years. The Milnes Daimler motorbus appeared in 1904. Purpose-built in Britain with a Milnes design body and a Daimler 24 horsepower engine, the bus was an instant success. Its layout was simple and owed much to the recent advances in horse bus design. Like the horse bus, it had an enclosed lower deck with seating for 16 passengers on 2 inward-facing benches. The upper deck accommodated a further 18, using the by now standard garden seat arrangement. The engine was mounted at the front, with transmission first by chains and then by drive shaft to a differential back axle. The open platform and staircase remained at the rear. In this general format, the Milnes Daimler established the basic pattern around which several generations of vehicles would be designed. The appearance of the Milnes Daimler also sparked an explosion of motor bus production by a variety of different manufacturers. The most successful of these new models was the Straker Squire. By 1906, London alone boasted over 400 motor buses, of which Milnes Daimlers and Straker Squires together made up almost 3/4. 2 years later, when the population of London's buses soared to more than 1,000, these 2 models still accounted for the same proportion, but the Straker Squire had moved into top position. However, not all the early bus manufacturers and operators favoured the new internal combustion engine. For some, the phenomenal success of the railways provided inspiration. Steam-powered road vehicles had appeared intermittently throughout the 19th century, but the early years of the 20th saw a resurgence of interest in steam, and a number of steam-powered buses were introduced to service. The most famous of these, and perhaps the best, was the Clarkson's steamer. Extremely quiet, but immensely complex and difficult to drive, they managed only to prove that steam remained unsuited to the constantly fluctuating levels of demand which typify bus operation. Yet, if the horse bus had been rendered obsolete, it was not everywhere apparent. Like many an established and familiar feature of public life, its demise was not sudden. Their enduring popularity and the tenacity of their operators were to ensure that horse bus operations persisted into the second decade of the century. Nowhere was this tenacity more in evidence than in the congested streets of central London, a place where the tram had never become established, and where the first motor buses found themselves surrounded by vast numbers of their horse-drawn predecessors. The last chapter in the history of the horse bus is one of steady marginalisation, declining profits, and for many of the operators, eventual bankruptcy and penury. The vehicle that effectively ended that history was the superlative London General B-Type. The B-Type was an amalgamation of all the most successful features of the many makes and models which made up the London General fleet. The new bus was introduced in October 1910. Described as a paragon of all virtues, it was, most importantly, the first truly reliable motor bus. The B-Type's rise to popularity was swift, even by the standards of that age of experimentation and change. Within 2 years, roughly 28 were being built every week. The appeal of the B-Type lay in the simplicity and efficiency of its design. Capable of speeds of 35 miles per hour from its 25 horsepower engine, it was also considerably cheaper to produce than any of its contemporaries, costing operators less than £300, and available in both single and double-deck varieties. The B-Type swept all competitors from the streets of the capital, enabling London General to amass the largest single-model motor bus fleet in the world, a distinction it would hold for 40 years. As the ability of the bus to transport people beyond the confines of their daily routine became clear, the early harbingers of the modern British coaching industry began to emerge. Initially, these were typically Model T Fords, adapted to carry a larger number of passengers. But as the industry matured, the specially built char-a-banc came into existence. There was no standard design, and a bewildering variety of styles and types proliferated. Their differences, however, were often less marked than their similarities. Virtually all had forward-facing seats, pitched comparatively high off the ground, and most had neither roof nor windows, affording an unrestricted view and making the char-a-banc an ideal touring vehicle. The early char-a-banc was to be remembered with wistful nostalgia by those for whom it symbolized an age of vanished innocence. The Great War, when it came, brought the infant coaching industry to a temporary halt. Like so many other spheres of public life, transport services were severely restricted. Many of the best vehicles were commandeered for military use, and those that remained struggled under greater workloads. The flood of volunteers for service in France also drained the industry of much of its skilled labor force. Manpower shortages, affecting equally almost every industry, led to the recruitment of large numbers of women workers. As well as driving and conducting, women performed a number of no less essential tasks. Soon, women were being trained in the hitherto unheard of areas of mechanical engineering, vehicle building, maintenance, and servicing. The return of peace brought with it a period of greatly increased demand. This was the heyday of public transport. Buses, trams, and railways prospered. Better and cheaper services and a rising standard of living meant that people could afford to travel more regularly. Housing estates sprang up outside the city boundaries. Services proliferated, and opportunities for expansion seemed almost limitless. The period also saw a number of important advances in bus design, many largely encouraged by a growing concern for passenger comfort. The pneumatic tyre, appearing in 1920, allowed passengers to ride on air for the first time. Journeys instantly became noticeably smoother, removing at a stroke one of the few surviving advantages of the tram. New regulations introduced in 1926 heralded the advent of the modern, fully enclosed double-decker. And by the end of the decade, the raising of speed limits to 20 miles per hour ensured that remaining open-top designs quickly became obsolete. The 1920s also saw the emergence of a new generation of buses. The most famous of these, the Leyland Lion, was to set new standards of style and comfort for the industry. The line's success lay in its classically functional design, differing radically from its predecessors in that its chassis was purpose-built for passenger operation. Previously, vehicle manufacturers had used a common chassis, whether for building buses or trucks. By redesigning the chassis, Leyland were able to reduce the overall frame height and lower the saloon floor level by almost a foot. This made the line more stable, and entry and exit for the passengers easier and more convenient. Building on success, Leyland quickly introduced two further models, both of which, like the Lion, were destined to become classics. The first of these was the Titan TD1. Appearing in 1927, the Titan was an instant success, representing, as it did, a huge advance in design on even its most recent predecessors. Its modern, sleek lines and its low height heralded the birth of an entirely new era for the double-deck bus. Leyland's low-bridge body sat 48 passengers with a sunken-side gangway in the upper saloon and an overall height of just 13 feet, some 2 to 3 feet lower than previous fully enclosed double-deckers. At the same time, Leyland unveiled the Tiger TS1, consolidating the achievements in design and performance manifest in the Lion. The Tiger, like the Lion, sat up to 35 passengers, but with its more up-to-date components was both faster and more reliable. From its introduction, the Tiger saw service both as a bus and a coach, some being purchased specifically to run as fast express coaches for fare chasing on highly competitive routes. These two buses were to establish Leyland as a market leader in the industry. Within 18 months of their introduction, Titans and Tigers accounted for 1,400 orders. At this time, the coaching industry was also passing through a series of transformations. Earliest charabancs had gradually given way to vehicles with larger hoods, which could be pulled over if inclement weather threatened the comfort of the passengers. With the relaxation of speed limits, windows had to be installed. And when these two features became standard, the traditional charabanc became the modern coach. The coach, like the bus, had a purpose-built chassis, affording lower floor and frame heights, greater stability and higher speeds. With higher speeds and the greater passenger capacity provided by purpose-built chassis, the new coaches could carry more people faster and further than ever before. Interior fittings raced to keep up with the rapid pace of vehicle development. Technical advances were matched by an accelerating pace of design innovation. Seats were luxuriously upholstered and styled in the most modern fashions. Panel work, both external and internal, reached new heights of sophistication, and the vogue for sightseeing produced a range of early observation saloons, some of which achieved levels of luxury which have yet to be surpassed. Yet it was, as ever, in the cities that the most important developments were taking place. In 1930, the Road Traffic Act introduced a system of licensing that was to have far-reaching consequences for the future provision of public transport, both on a municipal and national level. Vehicles for the first time had to have a certificate of fitness, renewed annually, subject to inspection. Drivers, conductors and owners were all required to hold licenses. But the centerpiece of the new system was the road service license. This committed the operator to fixed routes, timetables and fares. The new regulations brought a period of order and stability to the industry. The road service license effectively conferred upon its holder all the privileges as well as the responsibilities of a state-regulated monopoly. The 1930s were marked by a process of steady rationalization. Transport strategies could be elaborated within the secure environment of a controlled market, in which the larger operators and local authority concerns were able to flourish. This was a time of cooperation and consolidation in the industry. A time when new standards of public service were established. The vehicles themselves suffered none of the radical metamorphoses that had rendered so many of their predecessors prematurely obsolete. Instead, efforts were directed at making existing designs better and safer. While braking, transmission and suspension systems were all developing greater sophistication, the single most important advance of the period was the development of the diesel engine. Despite its higher initial cost, the diesel engine proved far more efficient and economical than its petrol counterpart. It required less lubricant and consumed less fuel, saving on operating costs and translating revenue into better and cheaper services. By 1935, 1/3 of all new buses were being fitted with diesel engines. The decade was also marked by a significant growth in the number of trolley buses on Britain's roads. These vehicles had first appeared in the 1920s, often augmenting existing tramway systems. But by the early 30s, the trolley bus had come to be seen as a logical successor to the tram. Coach and bus manufacturers were quick to seize the opportunities presented by the approaching obsolescence of the tram, producing ever-increasing numbers of these hybrid vehicles. The trolley buses were able to utilize what remained of a rapidly decaying tramway network, obviating the need for further investment and ensuring that the decay would be terminal. Yet, paradoxically, the trolley bus was destined from the outset to fall victim to the very process that gave it birth. Although the overhead power lines were to last longer than the tracks, their decay would in time spell the end for the trolley bus. As the decade drew to a close, the ascendancy of the bus seemed assured. Rationalization and the steady pace of technical development began to bear fruit in steadily improving services and designs. But once again, however, the march of progress was to be temporarily halted by the eruption of another war. Almost immediately, the drive to produce weapons and war equipment became industry's overriding priority. Research and development work ceased in all other spheres. By 1941, bus production had ceased completely, manufacturers turning over their factories to the production of arms. Transport was at a premium. Unsustained by replacements, bus fleets dwindled. Shortages of spare parts consigned many buses to an early retirement. Others simply succumbed to old age, while still more fell victim to the enemy's bombs. To alleviate the problems faced by public transport services, the government authorized the manufacture of a limited number of basic but serviceable vehicles. These were the utility buses, the most famous of which was the Guy Arab utility. The Guy Arab was far from the levels of comfort people had become used to. Wartime economies dictated only the absolute minimum regard for passenger convenience. The bodywork and fittings were crudely built, and some of the mechanical components were so primitive they had not seen production for decades. But the Guy Arab and its single-deck counterpart, the Bedford OWB utility, fulfilled that most important of criteria. They moved people cheaply, efficiently, and quickly. Distributed by the Ministry of War Transport, these Spartan yet reliable vehicles were a godsend to both operators and passengers alike. The return of peace in 1945 brought with it a welcome return to normal working in the transport industry. Standards of service not seen since the 1930s were gradually resumed. 1946 saw the appearance of 3 new vehicles. The AEC Regent RT was in fact a pre-war design, and its prototype had enjoyed an all too brief period of production in 1939. By mid-1947, however, 70 were in service with regional operators. But it was in London that the RT had its greatest impact, accounting for some 4,500 of the capital's buses by the end of 1953. Another pre-war design to appear at this time was the Bedford OB. Fitted with Dupla's classic Vista bodywork, the OB was the first choice of independent coaching operators throughout the country. In the first 5 years of production, nearly 13,000 OBs entered service. But in October 1950, with orders still high, Bedford took the surprising decision to cease production, leaving a large gap in the market. Many operators, stuck for an alternative, simply struggled on with their existing OBs, reluctant to give up on such a timeless masterpiece of design and engineering. Even today, original examples of this coach are still to be found on Britain's roads. Members of a growing fleet of vintage buses, which have remained in or been reintroduced to service. This 1950 Dupla Vista OB operates a tourist service in the Scottish Highlands. After previous use in a variety of roles, the coach was purchased by enthusiasts and carefully restored to its present immaculate condition. Indeed, the classic bus in Britain is currently enjoying a renaissance, as more and more often sadly neglected vehicles are being rescued and restored. At Manchester Museum of Transport, a group of dedicated volunteers work tirelessly to maintain a large percentage of the exhibits in full running order. This 1947 Bedford OB, seen here on static display, is currently in the process of being returned to its original working condition. Beautifully restored bodywork by SMT in Edinburgh closely resembles the more common Dupla Vista version. True to the traditions of the British coaching industry, the bodywork and interior layout are both more ornate and luxurious than would have been found on an urban service bus of the period. Plans are afoot to add this fine example to the museum's lists of operational exhibits. The vogue for ornamentation achieved perhaps its highest degree of sophistication in the post-war era. This early 1950s coach, built by Crossleys of Manchester, features many of the Art Deco forms typical of the period. A fine example of pre-war bus design can be seen here in the museum's 1930 Leyland Tiger. Unfortunately, little of the bodywork is original. The vehicle had a checkered history, serving during the war as an ambulance and ending its working life as a mobile canteen. In the 1960s, the vehicle was purchased for preservation and the body carefully reconstructed in the authentic style of the period. The distinction between bus and coach design can be clearly seen in the simple yet attractive lines of the Tiger. Restoring and maintaining the vehicles takes up a large part of the volunteers' time. Here, Steve Lord, the museum's press and publicity officer, is washing a Crossley single-decker.
It's very local to us. The feature of this museum, as you've probably already gathered, is that all vehicles, on exception, are all connected with the Manchester area. And that is really our theme. So this bus has fitted in particularly well. That it's Crossley, of course it's manufactured in Crossley, Crossley's in Manchester, and it came from Bolton. Bolton also had Crossleys. I think the theory was that in those days, in the late 40s, early 50s, that the local civic undertakings would at all times, if possible, try and buy from local industry.
Yet, despite the emphasis on local makes and concerns, the museum's collection of working vehicles is unrivaled anywhere in the country. Here, a 1958 Titan is undergoing road tests. Leyland's Titan PD was the third of the new buses to appear in the years immediately following World War II. Unlike the RT and the OB, the Titan owed little to its pre-war namesake. When it appeared, the new Titan incorporated many of the most recent developments in design and engineering. In particular, the large 7.4-litre engine owed less to Leyland's long history of bus building than to its wartime experience of designing and building military vehicles. The new model, with its thoroughly up-to-date transmission, braking and suspension systems, began to roll off Leyland's production lines right behind the last of the military orders. During the 20 post-war years of Titan production, Leyland introduced a wide variety of different models, many in response to the ever-growing market for higher and higher capacities. Appearing in 1958, the museum's Titan PD2-34 was part of an experimental batch and is one of only 6 remaining examples fitted with air brakes and a unique form of semi-automatic pneumocyclic transmission. Progress eventually overtook the Titan, but it remains a classic example of the traditional front-engined, rear-entrance double-decker. Mark Prescott is one of the younger members of the museum's Corps of Volunteers. Like many of his colleagues, Mark devotes most of his spare time to the museum's collection. One of his principal duties is ensuring that the vehicles are maintained to Ministry of Transport standards.
The vehicle I'm currently driving is a Leyland Royal Tiger. It was built in 1953 for Manchester Corporation, one of 25 vehicles. The batch was unique in that the 25 vehicles represented all types of entrances. Some had rear entrances, some had forward entrances, and the one I'm driving had centre entrance. Originally it was designed to be a crush loader, like for standing passengers, and it was modified to be a conventional vehicle, but all the time it was conductor operated. The driver being in the compartment, enclosed as I am at the moment. Leyland Royal Tiger is a very heavy bus, and this vehicle weighs nearly as much as a traditional double-decker. The suspension that's fitted to this vehicle is of the leaf type. The spring is made up from about 9 or 10 sections of steel that are banded together. Leaf suspension was used from very early days. The more modern vehicles, they have either air suspension or hydroelastic, or even the London Routemaster used coil suspension. That was made up of the chassis. It was made up of 2 subframes. It tends to give a rather bumpy ride in modern driving conditions, and this will be reflected in the view that you're seeing of me, the camera bouncing up and down.
An early 1950s addition to the Leyland stable, the Royal Tiger incorporated one of the most significant engineering advances to affect single-deck bus designs. After years of research, temporarily halted by the war, an acceptable horizontal engine was developed, which could be mounted underneath the floor, yet remain mechanically reliable. The new layout had one major disadvantage. To accommodate the engine, the floor had to be significantly raised, resulting in an unacceptably high step-up for short-stage urban work. These vehicles, however, quickly found their niche as long-distance coaches, where height became a virtue. The Royal Tiger remained in service for many years, its popularity assured by its spacious and uncluttered passenger area. The improved design allowed up to 45 passengers to be carried without any reduction in standards of comfort. This was a marked increase on earlier front-engine models. But perhaps the most famous of all the vehicles in the museum's collection is the London Routemaster. RM1414, still in perfect working order, began its life in Manchester, where it went on trial when new in 1963. After weeks of evaluation, the municipal authorities remained unimpressed and no orders were placed. The vehicle then returned to London, where it remained in service for almost 20 years, before being presented to the museum for preservation. Routemasters first began to appear on the streets of London in 1959 and were destined to come to typify both the capital and the British double-decker in the minds of many. Heralded by one critic as probably the greatest step forward in bus design, not only in London transport's history but for the bus world in general, the Routemaster was the result of a process of many years of testing and modification. Designed by and for London Transport, in association with AEC and the bodybuilders Park Royal, the Routemaster featured an integral frame with aluminium alloy panels in place of the traditional separate chassis and body. Though this made the bus significantly more expensive than its contemporaries, it was both larger and lighter than its predecessor, the RT, and boasted technical components not to become standard for more than 20 years. Hydraulic brakes, independent front suspension, and rear air suspension all came as standard. Easily detachable subunits housing the engine, gearbox, and rear axle allowed for maintenance and repair with a minimum of time and trouble. Attention to detail, coupled with sophistication of design, endowed the Routemaster with another positive quality, one which only time would reveal. Although eclipsed even before it was introduced by the appearance of the first rear-engine double-decker, the Routemaster shows no sign of disappearing from Britain's streets. Almost 35 years since they first entered service, many can still be found in operation. The Routemaster's consistent history of reliability has ensured its continuing popularity with operators and passengers alike. Even Manchester, the city that rejected the Routemaster 30 years ago, now employs these classic buses on its regular urban routes. The period that saw the introduction of the Routemaster also saw the final demise of the tram. Since the 1930s, the tram's decline had been steady and irreversible, yet the threat briefly posed by the trolleybus was ultimately to be carried out by the bus. As maintenance and repair costs rose ever higher during the 40s and 50s, tramway companies viewed the future with gloom. Reinvestment in the essential infrastructure of track and line seemed unwise in an era characterized by falling passenger numbers in all areas of public transport. Tram removal reached its height in the latter half of the 1950s, a decade marked by tramline closures in almost every British city. By the beginning of the 1960s, the last urban networks would have been shut down, and the great infrastructure of rails and power distribution systems dismantled and scrapped. Soon, their only monument would be the newly resurfaced roads, which in many places still bear the discernible scars of track long since torn up. The tram's misfortune, however, was to provide the bus industry with a much-needed boost. Every newly dismantled network produced a fresh batch of orders for buses. Manufacturers like Leyland, Daimler and Bedford increased output to cope with demand. The victory of the bus over the tram seemed complete, and bus operators and passengers alike settled down to enjoy a period best described as an Indian summer. This was a time when the municipal operators could enjoy an all too brief period of stability, produced by steady expansion, and the reliability and efficiency of their vehicles. Buses like the Titan had benefited from an ongoing process of refinement, incorporating state-of-the-art materials and numerous technical innovations. Craftsmanship still featured highly in the bus building process, with large numbers of skilled workers involved in every stage of a vehicle's birth. Maintenance and repair had also benefited from research and development, with more standardized spare parts more readily available. With ease of access to engines, radiators, and other components now seen as an integral part of good bus design, workshop practices were both easier and more efficient. Vehicles could be quickly repaired and returned to service with a minimum of disruption. But the Indian summer was not to last forever. Demand for new buses soon tailed off as the brief resurgence in passenger numbers was overtaken by the underlying trend of decline. The post-war boom had brought a new era of prosperity. As incomes rose, so did people's aspirations. This was the birth of the consumer age, the age of fashion, ephemera, gadgets, but above all, of the private motor car. Motoring, once the privilege of only the very rich, became an aspiration shared by everyone. The processes of technological development that had allowed the bus to profit from the demise of the tram also revolutionized the motor car industry. The luxury car market expanded to meet the demands of a newly affluent minority. But the real success story of these years was the emergence of the cheap and reliable family saloon. Cars like the Hillman Imp, Morris Minor, and Austin Mini, although lacking the glamour of their luxury counterparts, were mechanically sound and, just as important, well within the reach of the average family budget. The new models found instant popularity. The motor car industry flourished and car production rocketed. But as car ownership grew, the demand for public transport diminished, and the workhorse of public transport, the bus, entered a period of steady decline. Only today are the first signs of a cautious optimism beginning to appear within the industry. As the end of the century approaches, the prospects for operators and manufacturers may at last be beginning to improve. One crucial factor in maintaining the viability of Britain's bus services throughout this time has also helped to pave the way for a future return to prosperity. That factor was the adoption of the extreme front entrance on all new urban short-stage buses. This, coupled with the move to legalise one-man operation in 1966, may well have been the industry's salvation. Falling revenues had dictated a fundamental re-evaluation of urban bus operations, prompting operators to conclude that passenger numbers could no longer justify a crew of two. Once this had been recognised, the days of that old British institution, the Clippy, were numbered. An integral part of the world of the bus since its earliest days, the conductor or conductress soon became a memory, pushed aside by the harsh demands of the marketplace. This was the price the industry had to pay in order to secure economic viability. But the movement to one-man operation, where the driver is also responsible for the collection of fares, was, curiously, the result of design improvements, as much as a catalyst for further developments. The introduction of acceptable rear-engine buses facilitated the cost-cutting measures of the middle 60s, and soon the one-man crew became the norm. The Leyland Atlantean, seen here in one of its earliest versions, was one of the first designs to pioneer the now standard practice of placing the engine in a transverse position at the rear of the bus. This allows the entrance to be located at the extreme front of the vehicle, with the maximum amount of room for loading and unloading passengers. Building on the phenomenal success of the Atlantean, Leyland introduced the fully integral National in 1972, and in 1980, the Olympian, now one of the largest selling double-deck buses in the world. Together, these three buses have set standards of economy, reliability and design, quickly adopted and emulated by most other major bus manufacturers. Meanwhile, the urban bus's more glamorous cousin continues to fare well. The coach, always popular, is doing better business than ever. In a recent vogue for touring holidays, coach operators have found a new and lucrative market. Remote and beautiful areas of the country have become more accessible as coach travel continues to broaden the range of destinations available to travellers. Passenger comfort, as ever, remains a high priority. Whether on a day's hire for a wedding or a week-long tour of the Highlands, attention to detail and standards of service are as evident today as they ever were. For the flexibility and sheer range of service offered, coaching remains unrivaled in Britain. For many, the interurban coach services, which form such a central element of British public transport systems, are an absolute necessity, often serving communities left stranded by the ever-contracting rail network. Popular, convenient and cost-efficient, the coach has surmounted every new challenge and seems certain to continue to thrive. But what of the future for urban operators, so long beleaguered by falling passenger numbers and rising costs? Having survived and adapted during a long period of rapid change, the bus now faces the future with a confidence not seen for many years. Urban congestion, fast approaching crisis proportions, is forcing local authorities to reappraise not merely their public transport provision, but their entire traffic management strategies. As the motor car is increasingly seen as a pariah, the bus, with its comparatively greater efficiency and more environmentally friendly image, stands only to benefit. For well over 150 years, the bus has proved itself the equal of every competitor. Not for the first time have the prophets of doom failed to appreciate its resilience and adaptability. How bus operators will meet the challenges of the next century, or how buses themselves will evolve in response to new requirements and demands, we cannot predict with certainty. We can only be sure that they will.